Last week, I had the pleasure of appearing on Church and State with Caleb Collier. We had such a good conversation, I decided to invite Caleb to come on The Truth. Caleb Collier, welcome to The Truth.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I love the name of your show. That's what we're all about, right? Is pursuing truth.
Totally. You know, I was watching earlier this week a Senate Oversight Committee investigating the COVID outbreak, and they were interviewing a whistleblower. Ron Johnson, who is a member of that committee, asked the whistleblower, and the whistleblower, by the way, worked for the CIA. And he has had a lot of blowback as a result of his decision to speak out. Ron Johnson said, "Who runs the deep state?" And his response was, "I don't know." And I've been asking the identical same question for about 4 years now. Do you have an inkling?
Yeah, that's a big question. There are names that we know that we're suspicious of, and you know the deep state can go by many different names: the Bilderberg Group, the World Economic Forum, those that run around naked at Bohemian Grove. But will we ever know truly who's at the top? Probably not until the Antichrist emerges on scene.
Well, my suspicion is that the CIA is at the epicenter of the deep state. I think that most of the atrocities that have happened in our country during my lifetime have the fingerprints of the CIA and the FBI all over them. I'm personally sick of it. I think that it is a cancer inside of our federal government that has to be excised. And I don't mean the entire CIA, just the bad part of it. Find the people inside the CIA that, you know, I know many, many smart people. And I tend to get along really well with smart people. And but then there is a class, there's a number of smart people, many of them who went to Harvard, who truly do think that they are some kind of an elite group that know the answers to questions better than anyone else. And I just call BS on that, because I've seen a lot of their answers, which I vehemently disagree with. So the CIA employs a lot of real eggheads. A lot of Ivy Leaguers find their way into the CIA. I don't know what's going on. One possibility that I consider is that there are a group of people inside the CIA and the FBI and the NSA that think they're smarter than everybody else, and that they should just make decisions on how to run our country. To hell with the Constitution and the rule of law. And as Ron Johnson pointed out in that hearing, they just flick the Congress off. When they subpoena documents and require information be sent to them, they just don't respond. How arrogant, how rude, how destructive to our country in the long term could they be? I think it is time to do more than convene a church committee. I think it is time to reform the alphabet agencies inside our government and do it with a pretty broad brush. Your thoughts?
I would absolutely agree with that. I am a libertarian of the minarchist vein, not monarchist, minarchist. Many people don't understand that, but it's a very minimal type of government. And, you know, John Adams' famous words, a lot of people like to quote these, that our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate to any other. But we have to flip that on to the government as well. When we look at the Founding Fathers, they were an elite class. There's no doubt about that. But they were a moral and religious people. And so they wrote a republic for us. And then Benjamin Franklin's famous words, if we can keep it. I would argue that most of the people that are currently leading this country are not moral and they're not religious. And so our leaders are a massive problem. I think a great start is to go after pretty much every single one of these alphabet agencies. As a libertarian, I believe that the vast majority of government functions can actually be performed in a better way through either the church or individuals or charities, those types of things, I'm all for. It drives my wife nuts, but I hate public parks. I would like to go to a park in a neighborhood where I have to spend $2 to get into the park, or $5 to get into the park. I think it would actually run a whole lot more efficiently than what we currently have with our government systems.
Well, that's an interesting idea. In Atlanta, in a federal park owned by the United States Park Service, you don't have to pay to get in, you just have to pay to park. And they're ruthless about ticketing you if you don't pay to park in the public park. That's always seemed to be a little anomalous to me. But the parks would probably be cleaner. People would probably take better care of them if they had to pay 50 cents to get in. So it's an idea worth considering. I just hate to have to pay more money to the government to get anything, especially to use land that we already own. But we digress. I mean, I think that there is possibly the emergence of a recognition in this country about the deep state and the bad things that the government has done. I've been calling for several years now that we need a Day of Atonement where all the secrets are just released. I've also called, and I know this is a little bit of a fantasy, but I would support an initiative where we grant amnesty to all members of Congress who will come into a confession booth, and we'll get a political priest and clergy to man those confession booths, and you get a 1-month window to confess all of your sins, particularly as relate to bribes that you may have taken, blackmail to which you may have succumbed. We will keep your secret secret, and we will forgive you. But then we use that information to go after the people that have done the blackmailing and the bribery. That will never happen. But don't you think that if we were able to get to a clean baseline of morality, that we could have a good government?
I mean, that's a really interesting idea. I got to tell you. Do you think a month is a long enough time? I mean, I'm thinking of some of these politicians. It might take years to get everything off of their chests with all the nefarious activities that they've been engaged in. So I'm not sure if that month would be enough, but I like the idea because, you know, the politicians aren't the problem. It's the root issue. It's the people, like you said, that are engaging in the blackmail. It's the Jeffrey Epsteins, which I've been saying on my show for a very long time. There are hundreds of Jeffrey Epsteins. We know about one. We know about 2 locations, a ranch in New Mexico and an island in the Caribbean. But there are thousands of locations where this kind of stuff is going on. And if our government is being led by people who are satanic pedophile cannibals, I think the American people need to know that.
How do we get the word out? First of all, how do we learn with certainty who those people are? Then we can figure out how to out them.
Yeah, I mean, great question. I mean, we have the Epstein lists, you know. I mean, we've known about it for a long time. Biden had it. Biden wouldn't release it. Trump has it now. He won't release it. And I'm not beholden to political parties. I don't care. I will go after the Democrats just as much as I will go after the Republicans. We need to hold our leaders accountable to this. And I think releasing the Epstein files is something that the vast majority of Americans can get behind. You know, we had Pam Bondi over there saying, it's on my desk. And then she's saying, oh, wait, I never said it was on my desk. When she's quizzed about it, she's like, but the Dow is at 50,000. I'm like, I don't care about the Dow right now. I want to know about children who were molested, raped, murdered. That's way more important to me than the economy of the United States. I want to know. I don't care if Trump's on the list. I want to know it. And if he is, then he should be held accountable for it. Same with a Democrat or any Republican. We need to completely just remove any of these, probably the most evil people I can imagine. We need to remove them from their seats of power, and then maybe we can correct the United States on the path that it's currently on.
You make a compelling argument. I've taken the position that I don't really care so much about who's on the list. I do and I don't. I do from the standpoint of people who are in power. I don't for people who are not in power. The danger is that you sweep people into this net who engaged in no nefarious activity with Jeffrey Epstein, and you run the potential of ruining their lives, their careers, their families. And I think that's a risk that's just too more than I'm willing to accept at this point in time, unless we could figure out a way that it could be done to separate those people out of the list. But I am obsessed with finding out who sponsored it. I don't believe for a minute that Jeffrey Epstein did this on his own and that he was able to engage in these illegal, unlawful, amoral activities without the cover of our government. And I'm sure that on some pathetic level, they rationalized what they did, believing that they were somehow going to help our government. But really what they were doing is rationalizing their own unlawful, amoral activity to justify a result. And the result was that they could control these people with power and demand that they do things, vote certain ways, and conduct themselves like they were told to do, rather than allow them to base their conduct on their conscience, their God, and their voters, their constituents.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's all about leverage. That's what Jeffrey Epstein was about. And all evidence that I've seen seems to point to exactly what you were saying, the CIA and also the Mossad. It appears that Jeffrey Epstein was working for both agencies. And if you think I'm being unfair to the United States or to the nation of Israel, newsflash, every country is doing this. Every country has individuals like Epstein that want leverage. And this is how it works. For the longest time politically, if they could catch a congressman, for example, in an affair, just a simple, I guess, traditional affair, for lack of a better word, just a man and a woman.
We're
I know.
Minimizing, trivializing an affair, cheating on your wife. Oh, well, it's just
I know,
an affair. But
in the modern sense,
because that pales by comparison to what we believe happened at Epstein Island and in his domiciles in New York, New Mexico, the Caribbean.
Absolutely. And so, that was how they controlled people. If they could have you on camera or pictures of you engaging in an affair on your wife, right? But then that became to where our morality slipped as a country, and then it became homosexuality. So now if they could find a congressman who was into men, boom, now they're controllable. But as morality continued to slide, homosexuality got where it was completely accepted. And now we're at a point in this country where it's kids. Pedophilia is still, I want to say, universally looked down upon. Now they're trying to combat that. The sick leftists with a horrible agenda are trying to combat that. They're trying to legalize it in California, for example. But right now, that is how they control people. It's leverage. And so if they can have you on video raping a little kid, they own you. They control you. You will vote. You will do whatever they say. Hopefully our country doesn't come to a point where pedophilia is accepted, but if it does, they'll probably move on to bestiality, as gross as that sounds. But that's the progression of control.
I would prefer, not personally, I would prefer if the morality is between pedophilia and bestiality, I would say go have sex with animals. But to me, children are a red line. I mean, I think that it should be, it would be fine with me if it were a capital offense, that if you rape or do something immoral towards a child, I think you should be hung in the town square. I have no reservations about that whatsoever. And, I'm not sure. I go back and forth in my own mind on whether I'm a libertarian or whether I'm a strict constructionist. And want to follow the laws of God. I don't waffle on following the laws of God, but then again, I do a little bit when it comes to being a libertarian. I mean, I for a long time, I thought that was really cool, that live and let live. You decide your own morality, I'll decide mine. If you want to follow Christ's teachings, great. As I want to, that I aspire to do that. I'm a human being and we're all sinners. I'm not perfect, except, of course, in my wife's eyes. But we strive to be good people. But then a friend of mine said, that's such a cop-out. You're letting people that go against God's word off the hook on the basis of this libertarian notion. So I'm not sure where can you be strictly Old Testament in some context and libertarian in others? I mean,
absolutely.
To me, weed is a place where, for a long time, I just said, let people make their own decisions. I mean, is it where in the Netherlands that they're pretty libertarian, or were for a long time? Drugs were readily available. There was not enforcement, but I think that social experiment proved to be very flawed. And they got tired of running the methadone clinics and caring for people who became wards of the state because they abused drugs and got addicted. And then they become the state's problems, not to mention, their lives were ruined. So I'm questioning the libertarian viewpoint. It can't be a one size fits all, I don't think.
No, and I agree with you. And this is the wonderful thing about anyone within the the right leanings politically is that we can engage in good conversations like this. I would say that I am a Christian libertarian, and Christ comes first. The fundamental point to understand with libertarianism is that they abide by the non-aggression principles. And when you look at that and examine what our founding fathers were talking about with the law of nature and of nature's God, you can see that the non-aggression principles really align with that. So don't murder, don't steal, right? These are aggressive acts against another individual. And every libertarian, and there is a vast spectrum of libertarianism, would agree with those principles. Now, some of them, they get a little weird about abortion. And I would argue that killing a infant in the womb is an act of aggression. And so as a Christian, I'm going to be fundamentally opposed to the act of abortion, but some libertarians think that one's okay. When we look at something like what you were talking about with the drug policies, I would always point to the Prohibition era, where our government and all of its benevolence decided that, hey, Americans, you can no longer consume alcohol. And what did they do? Like how much of a fiasco was that? Clearly it didn't work. And in fact, our government started poisoning alcohol that they were getting from the bootleggers and letting it be distributed. So our own government was killing its citizens by poisoning alcohol. Look, the drug problem is always going to be a problem. It's like what Jesus said with the poor. The poor will always be among you. There will always be people, no matter what restrictions you apply, no matter what regulations, no matter how illegal you make it, there's going to be people that are interested in using drugs. The solution, in my opinion, is to remove the safety nets. If an individual is going to engage in drug use, well, they shouldn't be on the public dole. They shouldn't be able to get a Medicare or Social Security. Personally, I think those should all go away anyway and be privatized. But if you remove that to where somebody, if they want to do drugs all day long, well, good luck finding food unless you go to a charity, a private charity. Maybe they'll give you some food. But it causes people to where they have to work in order to fulfill their addiction. And at that point, I firmly believe it would really reduce the amount of drugs. Not to mention the fact that drugs are all illegal in this country. Some of them actually, like marijuana, can have some health benefits, but we've created a black market, and you could argue that it's created the rise of these cartel lords.
Well, I remember going to Santa Barbara, California, to do a business meeting a number of years ago, and that was before pot was legal. But Santa Barbara seemed to be a refuge for young kids. that wanted to go smoke pot. And I was just shocked by the number of really attractive young 18, 20, 22-year-olds that were homeless and living on the streets, but the presence of marijuana in the air was everywhere. And I guess they grew it up in the hills. You know, I've got very mixed feelings about legalizing pot. That's where that's a prime example of the internal debate that I have. As a libertarian, I would say, yeah, sure, you want to smoke pot? Smoke pot. But we know that it destroys motivation, it creates apathy, and it's not a good long-term strategy. Then, you know, where do you draw the line? I mean, people who are suffering from a disease or an illness and are in constant pain and can find relief from pot, I think we would be inhumane if we did not allow them to have it. So I just don't know. I'm a little. I think we're conducting the experiment right now by legalizing pot in so many places. I don't know that it's a good long-term strategy for our young people.
You know, and I think anybody that's, using drugs should probably take a long, hard look in the mirror. I think right now with the experiment that's being run in places like Washington State, where I'm at, Oregon, California, Colorado, there's numerous states that have legalized it, is it's not a fair experiment because we still currently have all of these government entitlement programs, which are allowing people to literally waste away while still getting government money to feed their habit.
Yeah, there was a book written in the 40s, Think and Grow Rich, maybe? I think that was it. And in the book, the author made the point that we weaken the weakest among us because we prop them up. And that's the argument that you're making, which I absolutely agree with. And as a father of three boys, I've thought about it for the last 45 years. How do you raise your children, and how much do you give them, and under what circumstances? It's a tough choice, but I kind of err on the side of let them earn it.
I would agree. What we've seen, you talk about like generational wealth. If you actually examine maybe the grandfather, the patriarch, who built this company and through blood, sweat, and tears was able to make it successful, by the time it gets to the grandkid, most of them, their money is all gone because these kids, they haven't appreciated what they've given. And honestly, I think that's a great example of how we live as Americans. Our forefathers fought for this republic, for this beautiful experiment in liberty and freedom. And the vast majority of Americans nowadays, we don't appreciate it. We don't care about it. We're apathetic towards what this country could be, and we're allowing it to literally be utterly destroyed right in front of our eyes with no thought of what our kids or our grandkids are going to live under. That keeps me up at night. I got to tell you, John, like, I'm worried about the condition of the United States and where we go from here.
Well, I share your concern, and especially with the midterms just around the corner, if the American people don't show up at the polls, we have a real risk. Republicans have a real risk of losing the Congress, and the Trump agenda will be blocked for the next 2 years. So I think it is a major concern. You know, that Senate hearing that I spoke about at the beginning of the show, do you know how many Democrats attended?
Oh, I did. Wasn't it like zero or something like that?
It was like zero. It wasn't like zero. It was zero. So why would Democrats want to enable somebody like Anthony Fauci and cover up for what they did? I mean, maybe the deep state is enabled by the Democrats.
I think the deep state is enabled by what I would say is the uniparty. I heard a great political joke the other day, John. I actually wrote into my will that when I die, I want 6 Republicans, congressmen, to be my pallbearers. That way they can let me down one more time. And that's the state of the Republican Party right now, is that they give us a lot of promises, and we were promised a lot of things, and I will be fair, some things have occurred. But traditionally, when we're looking at especially recent history, the Republican Party really hasn't done much for us. And I think, in what we were talking about earlier with the deep state, with the CIA, Mossad agents, there's a lot of foreign agents that are involved in this country. AIPAC, I mean, most of the Congress people are getting money, both Democrat and Republican, from AIPAC. They are controlled. And it's like... libertarians will say that the two wings of the same bird. They're all moving us towards an agenda of global control. I mean, when we examine what's currently being discussed in this country, the Real ID Act, where got an organic phone call, right?
Well, I thought it was Trump, but it's not. Yeah, I guess he's busy.
Well, we're currently experiencing a Real ID, which will be tied to our medical records, our health records, our banking. And if you don't have a Real ID, you will no longer be allowed to travel. It'll be directly tied to how you work. Now, coupled with that, with what they were talking about during 2020, during the COVID pandemic, and vaccine passports, they were saying if anybody didn't get vaccinated, that'd be me. I didn't take that stupid vaccine.
Well, you were smart.
I wouldn't have been allowed to work, right? I wouldn't have been allowed to travel. That is massively tyrannical, and it's coming to us from the Republicans. This is a massive problem that we need to be talking about in this country. That I don't care. I don't have a team. It's like a sports team. We've been divided through tribalism, where we look, oh, my neighbor's a Democrat, I automatically hate them. It's the same thing that they've done with race, with sex, with gender. They're all trying to divide us. And the vast majority of Americans that I talk to, we mostly want the same thing. We want to be left alone. We want to be able to raise our families. We want a home. We don't want gas to be through the roof so we can go take a family vacation. That's what's important to Americans. And neither party is actually taking us the right direction.
How do we get the genie back in the bottle? What's your solution to these very real problems that I certainly am in violent agreement with you on?
Absolutely. I used to work for the John Birch Society. Some of the gray hairs remember the John Birch Society. Great organization. And one of the things that they said, it was one of their taglines, was the Constitution is the solution. And so we have to go back. If we truly want to make America great, as Donald Trump promised, it is two things. Number one, we have to go back to being a religious people. And look, the country was built on the idea that there was religious freedom, okay? But primarily that was within really the Protestant denominations. You could be a Methodist, you could be a Quaker, you could be a Presbyterian in this country. Did we allow for Catholics and Jews? Absolutely. But there is some fundamental differences between certain religions and our Constitution. Sharia law takes precedence to a Muslim over our Constitution. That's a problem that we have to deal with in this country if we're going to open the borders to these people. Should there be legal immigration? Absolutely. But we got to go back to what the Constitution says. And we have all these activist judges. The judicial branch is completely ruined, in my opinion. Most people think that judges serve for life. That's not the case. Supreme Court justices don't serve for life. They serve in times of good behavior. That's what the Constitution says. So if we get some yahoo that's a Supreme Court justice that is looking at the Constitution as a living, breathing document, guess what the people can do? We can impeach them. Maybe we should start exercising that. That might be a way to start fixing some of these things at least.
Well, I think those are very good strategies, and I'm, again, in very much in agreement with you. I always felt like the judiciary is where you could find refuge and get justice, but it seems like that is likewise a fallacy and a fantasy today. Dustin Hoffman said in a movie I saw that you can get that they dispense justice at the courthouse, and sometimes you can even find it there.
As a sad statement, but it's absolutely accurate. So revamping the judicial system, giving the legislative branch the proper authority that it has according to our Constitution. I mean, we want to talk about foreign wars, right? I think most Americans are pretty tired of foreign wars. We've been at war. I mean, we've been at war since 2001 as a country with one nation or another. And Donald Trump said that he was going to put an end to that, and here we are. We've gone into Venezuela. We kidnapped a president of a sovereign country. Now Donald Trump's talking about Venezuela being the 51st state. I think he's trolling there personally. I don't think that's actually a plan or an agenda. But we're in Iran. People are saying it's just a conflict. It's a war, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it's a war. If you're bombing another country, that is an act of war. If somebody was bombing the United States, we would view it as an act of war. But if we actually started going back to the legislative branch and their authority, well, you cannot declare war without Congress. That's one of their authorities. And so I don't care who's in power. I don't care if it's Biden. I don't care if it's Obama, Trump, Bush. If you want to go to war against another country, well, you better get the approval of Congress, who are supposed to represent we the people. Another solution that I would point to is abolishing the 17th Amendment. The 17th Amendment is one of the worst amendments to our Constitution that we have ever had. If we went back to senators actually representing the states instead of the people, I think we would be in a much better situation.
That's an interesting concept. Jacob Collier, we've certainly identified a lot of problems here today. We'll keep working on them. Tell us about church and state and what you're about. Does it go beyond the podcast?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we're all over the place. We're part of the National Religious Broadcasters Television Network, which broadcasts into 39 million homes across America. Part of the Prepper Broadcasting Network, newscasters. We're pretty much at every social media. You can't find us on YouTube. I got banned because I wouldn't shut up about the vaccine, so they took me off the air. But Church and State, we've been at this for nearly a decade. I have a very interesting history. I'm a former city councilman. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, former EMT. I was actually born into a cult, which is another side story that's kind of interesting. I've worked for TPUSA Faith. I've worked for the John Birch Society. Currently work for a company called Mark37.com, which is we sell ghost phones, so phones that don't spy on you, which is a phenomenal thing. But if you want to check me out, churchandstate.media is the website. Right when you go on the website, you're going to get hit with a really annoying pop-up. But if you give us your name, address, and phone number, you'll get our newsletter. And also, I personally call every single person who fills that out. So if you want to have a conversation with me, agree, disagree, I will call every one of you who fills this out.
Thank you, Caleb. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate your coming on The Truth today, and I hope this is just the first of many conversations that we will have. Loved having you on. Thanks.
Absolutely.